Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex, and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Kirby Monday, and we're going to be taking a swerve to the left today because I've been reviewing early Fantastic Four, and while those first few introductory issues and new characters and costumes and stuff were obviously interesting and fun to go through, as I move ahead to issues, we got up to issue 14 of Fantastic Four in the reviews, I believe. I gotta say, I'm just not enjoying it as much as I thought I would because, Kirby at that point is still kind of a fairly standard artist. You've got little pangs here and there in some panels, but of the Kirby greatness, but it's not yet fully formed as it would be, most people argue, in and around the Galactus trilogy, right? Which is a lot later. And just finding it kind of a slog to get through those issues, to be honest. So I figured I'd, jumpstart the Kirby day just a little bit by going to the stuff that I'm really into. Again, 70s Kirby is kind of the height of his style for me, and his concepts and his wacky ideas, which is, Jack Kirby is great as just an artist, but just as a conceiver of concepts and ideas is amazing. You can read a Jack Kirby comic and, most times when I do from this period, I'll stop and wonder for a bit about a concept he's kind of illustrated or talked about, sometimes in only just one panel, and I'll have to stop and think about it. OMAC has moments like that, so when I review OMAC, I'll try to point that out as well. A lot of moments like that in OMAC in a weird way, kind of foretelling the future. I've always said I think Jack Kirby was kind of a visionary and, could not necessarily see into the future, but he could project ideas into the future. And a lot of the stuff that he kind of comes up with is stuff that we've got around today, right? Like if you talk about New Gods real quick, the mother box that they used for information and translation, all this stuff is basically just like the cell phone today, right? So that's, he's not the only one to predict it, but he's very specific in the fact that it's a, rectangular object that you hold in your hand. So that's pretty interesting. And this is kind of where it started at DC in the 70s for Jack Kirby. Kind of the beginning of the New Gods saga, starting here in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. At least that was the old title, because at least they were smart enough in the copy to highlight the fact that Kirby is here. This is his first issue for DC at the time, in 1970. He worked for them in the 50s and then for Marvel in the 60s, and now was back at DC. And I like how they kind of, changed the title to Superman's ex-pal, the new Jimmy Olsen, right? Kind of fun and interesting and chaperoning Kirby into the title. Only problem with what was going on in this title is that DC found it to be a good idea for some reason. Most of you probably know about this, but I'll mention it, to change the faces that Kirby had drawn of Jimmy Olsen and Superman to keep it more in line with how they looked in the comics in the 70s, right? And it's a huge mistake, one, because you've got this dynamic kind of, much more forward-thinking artist coming in, and then, you're redoing some of his figures. Like the Superman cover here, he's clearly drawn by whoever the regular kind of art team on the Superman titles was, and you've just got this huge clash of styles that really doesn't work. The feathering is completely different. I mean, Kirby does barely any, right? He's a lot of hatching, but feathering like this is a very kind of, basically, again, Kirby's looking to the future, the 70s, maybe the 80s already at this point, and DC's clearly stuck in the 50s, because to me, Superman, when you look at that face and you'll see in the comic, is basically still the Superman from the 50s, right? So it's like, yeah, DC is just not forward thinking in any way when it comes to new material, and Kirby is, so there's a clash there. But he is paying homage to tradition. He's brought back, he says introducing the Newsboy Legion, but they were around back in the 40s when he was working at DC. And plus the wondrous Whiz Wagon. You got to see it to believe it. Now, please understand, obviously, back in the 70s, whizzed, and, well, maybe people said, I'm going to take a whiz and piss, right? But whiz meant to be fast, right? Like the Whizzer, that character, who, obviously today, and unfortunately his costume is yellow, so what kind of connotation that gives us. But anyways, so here's the first page. Good shot of some Kirby layering, right? Characters in the foreground, background, profiles and stuff, and really creating an interesting image with honestly not that much going on. And it's the introduction of again of the Newsboy Legion. Here it actually says Jimmy Olsen, Superman's pal, brings back the Newsboy Legion. So at least it's mentioned here. Written and drawn by Jack Kirby, inked by Vince Colletta. Vince Colletta is going to ink those early issues of all kind of the New God stuff that Kirby's doing. It's like I guess he's his main inker on those early titles. And then Kirby's assistants will point out that he's doing kind of a horrible job, and then that's where they get Mike Royer, and that's where the 70s art really starts to sing. But right now, I think, you know, Coletta's doing a serviceable job on Kirby. Obviously, Mike Royer will be a lot better and a better fit, but here and there you get pangs of, like, I feel like he's, you know, been pretty loyal to the pencils here, except for some of these. Coletta could never quite get the squiggly line, you know, the Kirby squiggly line. He would either kind of ink it out somehow, right? Like it appears less than you would see with Mike Royer, even on, you know, folds and pants and things like that. You know, Kirby would kind of throw it all over the place. And again, it stunts the Kirby art a little bit to where we're not fully in the 70s yet, except when you see something like this. You know, what a great use of the double page splash by Kirby. This is something he would do a lot in the 70s. A lot of his comics have that pattern of first page is a splash, page 2 and 3 is a double splash. I've talked about this before. Eric Larson used that a lot in the Savage Dragon for a while. I've used it before in some of my comics. It's a very kind of good device to get you right into the story and get you looking at something interesting and cool, right? Like the Whiz Wagon. Like, how amazing is that? You know, Kirby just imagining this kind of supercar, supercharged technological marvel, I guess is what we'll call it. But to actually draw all that out, and I, you know, Kirby at this point, I don't think is lining much out. He's just kind of going at it. At least that's what everyone seems to say. So he's just got it down, and is able to draw these amazing concepts out. This in 1970 was like far out. It's still far out today, I think. Why am I using old-timey terms like far out? Probably because of the vibe of this comic. Something about the colors I really like too, because again, it's a very 1970s color scheme. And I just reviewed Jim Rugg's comic Octobriana, 1976, where he did a blacklight kind of thing. And I could see that, like, you know, no one was thinking about blacklight for the comic back in the day in the 70s, but I could see how this could easily be changed to blacklight, like the yellows and the purples and the blues and stuff. Very similar color choices to what Jim Rugg did there. So I guess that definitely helps his comic have that 70s vibe as well. And again, yeah, so we got, you know, the depiction of Clark Kent here, redrawn, and again, to look more on model as to what Superman was looking like back then. And Kirby, again, is just pushing forward with these concepts, the Whiz Wagon, right? And again, Coletta's inking here, I don't know if it does it justice. There's later issues. There's an issue of the New Gods where there's a story with a boat that takes place out in the water. And I mean, that's an amazing issue visually. How Kirby chooses to depict the water. Not quite as effective here, maybe, in these early Coletta inked issues, but nonetheless, that Kirby power still kind of shines through. I feel where Coletta might have left stuff out is in these lines here, right? I feel like Kirby probably filled that in more. And Coletta is known to leave stuff out, so that's just a hypothesis on my part here. And developing these dudes here that we're going to see coming up with the motorcycles. I mean, I would almost call these are forebears of the Dreadnoughts, you know, from G.I. Joe, because you'll see one character pretty much his design. I guess whoever designed the G.I. Joe toys may have ripped it off directly from here, or close enough, right? So this story is, so yeah, the Newsboy Legion and Jimmy Olsen encounter basically what it amounts to biker hippies. They're called the Outsiders. And, you know, definitely Kirby looking at society at that time. Biker gangs and stuff had kind of come into the social consciousness in around that time, with, you know, a lot of them being veterans coming back, a bit disenfranchised from the Vietnam War. So not just that, but some of that. Again, Jimmy Olsen's face here being modified. And here's the gentleman, as Jimmy Olsen has punched out their leader, basically is what they ascertain here. This guy here shows up, and he's the guy that, you know, really reminds me of that Dreadnought from G.I. Joe. We've got Clark Kent switching into Superman, on the hunt for Jimmy Olsen. He knows something's up and Jimmy may be in trouble, right? It's Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. Unfortunately, again, that kind of 1950s looking Superman just stands out and makes no sense with this clearly at the time modern, almost futuristic 70s background, right? There's such a clash there. It almost looks best when it's far away like this, where there's less kind of meddling with the aesthetic, the Kirby aesthetic. Even here, you still got almost some of the squiggle from his arm and that structure and power that you get. The figure is strong, but you know, just so little of the faces there that it almost feels Kirby right here. Also, the Superman symbol, Kirby had a different way of drawing it, which is the inspiration for how Alex Ross did it for Kingdom Come, which is a really cool look, and again, helped Superman kind of feel a bit more modern at the time, and DC just, you know, stifled it with this, you know, 50s aesthetic right on top. Kirby would come up with kind of interesting ways of not modifying, but putting new spins on Superman's powers, right? So right here, he's like, heat vision will help me track them. Every object is known to leave an after image of heat waves. And there's the image of the car. So you can kind of see the heat waves of the car. That's interesting. Never heard that one before. A lot of in between here. Whoever's putting that together has no design sense. But anyways. Yeah, so the faraway shots are the coolest, I find, because it's the ones that seem to retain most of the Kirby vibe and energy in the body language and the positions he puts the characters in. So in this comic, those are my favorite shots. Even here, I feel like, you know, they may have left the body, but they're still messing with the head a little bit, you know. Superman really has the receding hairline that makes him more, you know, like your uncle's Superman back in the day, you know. Even in 1970, this was your uncle's Superman. These, yeah, always being the best shots of Superman or when he's further off into the background here. All right, so some of these outsiders Superman encounters, God. Get another shot of our Dreadnought buddy here. Great Kirby dynamics, even though the inking maybe is not so hot by Vince Colletta. Always like this. You know, these foreground characters are coming into the foreground or just colored monochrome and dark so that, you know, you're focused in the right place. It's a simple kind of thing, but there's just something about that 70s coloring that goes in this direction that I really, really love. Classic scene of bikers surrounding their prey, right? Jimmy Olsen's retarded looking glasses, I gotta say, sorry. I don't know what Kirby was thinking there, or if that's a Kirby flourish. I guess because he joins the gang, right? He's part of the outsiders now. Superman gets gassed by Dreadnought bikers. Kryptonite. It says the beam that leaps from Yango's gun contains kryptonite. I love this. This is a Kirby thing because he's right now, right? It's not Stan Lee. It pierces Superman's inner structure and stuns him. Just that. I like the way that's described. And also because of all that Kirby vibe and energy that's going on in this panel, which again, I do think maybe Colletta made less impressive, but still kind of works. You almost get a better, you know, Kirby Superman. I don't think they mess with the face here. So you get a better Kirby Superman in this energy shot than you ever do with like even the next panel of just Superman's face here. I mean, oh my God, what were they thinking? Such a clash of styles. So Morgan Edge is basically kind of the villain that Kirby is setting up. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure if it, like they don't work for a newspaper anymore. They work for a television station news, I believe. Clark Kent and Jimmy Olsen. And he's the boss of that, right? And he seems to have some sort of involvement, you know, in nefarious New Gods stuff, as we'll see as we move along throughout this series and all the other New Gods ones. So Forever People, Mr. Miracle, and New Gods. Yeah, just again, the clash between styles is just so obvious. I think if you were reading comics in the 70s, you knew something was up. And if you knew anything about Kirby's art, you knew that clearly this was not Kirby at all. I mean, what a boring looking Superman. I've seen pencils of this. You can look them up online. The Kirby Superman is just 100 times better than what we're getting here. And then this again, when I say that Kirby can kind of stop you with an interesting concept, I mean, this is 2025 and I read this a few years ago. But I remember getting to this panel and just kind of stopping and looking at like, oh, wow, like this idea of like industrial kind of world built out of wood, which is kind of contradictory. I don't know exactly how that would work. You know, it's funny that he's got like smoke coming out of pipes and stuff, but just such an interesting kind of interpretation of that idea. And again, Kirby, the way he can draw buildings and geometric shapes and the way he uses them, just love this panel here, and very evocative and conceptually evocative, right? The highways are made of trees. It's pretty crazy. And that's, you know, the outsiders. They're you know, because they're hippies and they love nature. But you know, back then, I guess the environmentalist movement wasn't too huge. So it's like you're living in trees and nature, but you're still burning some of it. Funny concept. Jimmy Olsen, like, I wonder, I've seen the Kirby. It's not exactly this. It feels like they're not modifying him as much as Superman. Like, they don't care as much. But really, he is, you know, pretty much looking like the 1950s Jimmy Olsen as well. And that's where we're going to leave it here, with next issue being the Mountain of Judgment. Not sure I have that issue in single issues, but I do have the trade, so we'll probably be moving over to that one for the next review. So that is, oh, look at this. Before I say that is it. Cars so fast we had to find a way to control them. I love these racing sets. Had them in the early 80s too. Look how cool that car is there. Bet you the actual toy did not look half as cool as that. But love these ads back then that were still drawn, right? We're not yet using, you know, pictures everywhere. Eventually it'll get to that. Now we're using Photoshop, but just, yeah, still an illustrated ad. Very cool. All right, guys, there you go. That is my review of Kirby's first issue back at DC, I guess, for the New Gods saga in October 1970. Superman's X-Pal, the new Jimmy Olsen, issue 133. If you're still watching and you're subscribed, thank you so much for being there. If you're watching but not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a second, helps the channel grow, helps get us out there to other people who are into comics just like we are. So everyone out there, have an awesome day.
Like, subscribe, like, subscribe.
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.